Oh, hello. Welcome to the Mermaid Tavern. How you doing? Cheers. Slunch School. Bottoms up. Mm, nice. Ah. So, who was the first solo Beatle? It's an age-old question. A lot of people say George Wonderwall music. Uh, Sapcore 1? Sapcore 1? Is that Sapcore 1? Pretty good. I used to be pretty good on the old catalogue numbers. I mean, worked in record shops. I think that was Sapcore 1, wasn't it? The first Apple album. Appcore, showing my nerdy uh, Beatles collecting credentials now, aren't I? So a lot of people think that Wonderwall music, which is for a movie called Wonderwall. Did you see it? Jack McGowan, he was a Irish actor, worked a lot with Samuel Beckett. He was in that movie, but looking through into another world, the door. It's interesting movie. I love movies of the 1960s, and the soundtrack's interesting. I mean, I suppose because George not only wrote this soundtrack and very Indian influenced, if you've heard it, but also played on it and produced it. But that came out in 1968, 1 year before was The Family Way. The Family Way. This is the first Beatles solo record. The first Beatles solo recording. Paul McCartney was the first solo Beatle. Don't listen to any other propaganda. I know what you're going to say. He had minimal involvement with it. He wrote a theme, and then he wrote another theme. George Martin did all the legwork here, getting the George Martin orchestra together. Or as I think they were known as the Tudor Minstrels. Because they did, yeah, anyway, like a small piece orchestra. Uh, but, yeah, Paul didn't play on it, but he did compose it. So I'm sorry, this has got Paul McCartney's name on it. This is the first Beatles solo record. Don't want to hear any of your other nonsense. I've always thought of this as the first Beatles solo record. It's always intrigued me too. I remember buying a copy, not this copy actually. My dad bought me a copy. Came out an Australian import in 1980, was it? Or 79? I can't even remember now. But he bought me this is an Australian import, and I sold that somewhere along the line. And then uh, somewhere along the line, bought this, which is an original copy of it, UK copy of it. And yeah, you know the story about this. Have you seen the movie? I'm going to talk about this. I love this movie, actually. I really do. I'm a big fan of British movies of the 1960s, what they used to call kitchen sink dramas, things like Kind of Loving. One of my all-time favourite movie, I think I've talked about it before, is Billy Liar. I love that movie so much. Probably going to do an entire talk about it sometime, you know, if people would be interested in that. Um, I kind of want to do other stuff, talk about other things. Obviously, I love the Beatles and my big passion. So it's just great just to sit here and talk to you about anything Beatles related and things that are really interesting. Beatles. I've got loads of things I could talk about, So hopefully, as long as you keep watching me and liking if you can, if you do like, if you like, please, and also subscribe if you want to be you want to come into the tavern and get me at the tavern here for a drink again, please subscribe to get updates. But yeah, I've always thought of this as the first Beatles solo recording, and it's a great movie. 1966 it came out. The Bolting brothers, they were sort of twin brothers, Roy and John, and they'd done a lot of movies. Well, one of my favourite people is Peter Sellers, and they worked with Peter Sellers quite a lot, particularly I'm All Right Jack, which is a great sort of satire about the labour movement and shop stewards and all that. And Peter Sellers' Fred Kite is one of his great genius performances. But they worked with Peter Sellers quite a bit. And I think John Bolting directed Brighton Rock, which is that great original movie with Richard Attenborough, Pinky. So they were great. They had great credentials. But yeah, there's something about movies of this era which I always loved. And I think before I loved the music of the 1960s, which I do, the Beatles, the Who, the Kinks, Hendrix, Stones, and on, Dylan, you know. But my introduction to the 1960s was seeing British movies of this era. And this one I think I remember seeing when I was probably too young to understand what it was all about, because let's be honest, this is a sex comedy. I saw somebody on a video talk about it as like a children's movie. It's not. It's not. It's a sex comedy, gentle by today's standards, but it is all about a couple, a newlywed couple, and the guy. Let's be honest, he can't, as they say in the film, he can't get it on. He can't get it on. They can't get it on together. It's all euphemisms for what. I'm not going to be coarse, as my mum would say. But yeah, a couple who find it hard to, show their relationship. Consummate is the word. Consummate. I couldn't even find that word. Their relationship is very funny, but it's also very touching. That's what I like about movies of this era. They're not just sort of, they're not belly laugh. They're not like fall down funny. There's gentle humour, northern humour that appeals to me. Bill Norton. He was, I think he was actually from Ireland originally, but very young. His family settled in Lancashire, in Bolton, just north of Manchester. So he was a Bolton lad, and he wrote northern comedies. And earlier in 1966, Alfie had come out. And, that was Bill Norton. That was a play by him that was Alfie Atkins or something it was called, made into that movie with Michael Caine, which is great. I saw Alfie again for the first time. Again, I've seen it many, many times over the years. I saw that again last year. Just reminded what a genius movie that is. Bless Michael Caine. Bless him. Yeah, bless Michael Caine. Bless you, Michael, if you're watching. So, Michael. Which coincidentally, connection, of course, starring in Alfie, was Jane Asher, Paul McCartney's girlf at the time. Gorgeous Jane Asher. Hayley Mills was a really star, wasn't she? A Parent Trap and Pollyanna. That's right, Pollyanna. I couldn't think of it. There was a great British movie called Whistle Down the Wind. Did you ever see that? About these children discovering this convict in a barn. They think, Jesus, in a barn! And these three children, of which Hayley Mills is the oldest. That's brilliant. That's really wonderful. I hope you can hear me, by the way. My nose is all full of lurgy today. It's all blocked up, so hopefully you can understand what I'm saying. Somebody left a comment on one of my videos that at least if you're going to worse the effect, at least if you're going to go on a channel like this, at least speak English. I thought, ooh, right, well, I don't think my English is that bad, is it? Anyway, somebody left a comment. It's nice to leave comments, actually, but hopefully nice ones. It's always nice to get any feedback at all, even if it is, if you can't understand me or come into my world. No. Somebody put on that one where I fantasised about meeting Paul McCartney. Anyway, I digress. The movie, yeah, it's brilliant. I really love it. It's a really touching movie, and the music that Paul came up with. I've heard different things, whether the Bolting brothers approached him, or he'd said something to George Martin on the lines of he'd like to do not a film, not a movie, not a whole score, but just a theme for a movie, And either one of those, I don't know which one of those is true, but yeah, towards the end of 1966, he had a little theme. And now, remember, the end of 1966, we're talking about November, December, that era were just starting to come into that brilliant. Yeah, it's between the maelstrom of Revolver and Sergeant Pepper. You know, arguably Paul, John, at his creative peak. You know, and I was fascinated by that. End of touring '66. John went off uh, to do How I Won the War, which is another great movie, wasn't it, of the 1960s. And George went off to India. Ringo was chilling out. I think he went over to hang out with John for a bit on the set. He was in Spain, wasn't it, Almeria, part of it. And Paul was driving to, and supposedly was killed in a car accident. And somebody who looked remarkably like him and remarkably as talented as him emerged. And anyway, Sergeant Pepper was conceived, and they were just on the cusp of Strawberry Fields Forever and Penny Lane. Those two wonderful songs, perhaps the best double A side ever. I remember hearing that when Yesterday came out, which was just Paul, wasn't it? His song, and playing on it. George Martin sort of said to Brian Epstein, correct me if I'm wrong on this one, why can't this be a Paul McCartney recording? And he mooted the idea that it should just be put out Paul McCartney Yesterday. But Brian Epstein said something like, I'm not breaking up the Beatles. So isn't that interesting? So we have, and we know, of course, that songs like Eleanor Rigby had already used orchestrations. George Martin, the undoubted fifth Beatle, isn't he? I mean, not taking anything away from Brian, you know, they're probably somewhere between the two of them, fifth Beatle. But and of course, this is very much George Martin. But yeah, it's a Paul McCartney record. It's got his name on there. Look, it's a solo recording. But yeah, there was two themes. Yeah, that's the basic theme he came up with, and it was George kind of expanded on that theme. I think it was just a very short, played it on the piano in his music room at 7 Cavendish Avenue. That was the in Love in the Open Air. And all the, if you listen to it, it's like a suite, like a classical music has a suite, lots of different short pieces together. That's what a suite is, isn't it? I think orchestral pieces together. And it's only about 20-24 minutes long, this whole album. But they needed another theme, which is, I love that theme. Played at the very end. It's a bit sort of, it's brass band, sort of marching. It's really good. I don't know when does that. Yeah, so that was the secondary thing. And so basically, just those two, and I think that last one was kind of used in the end titles for the movie. But good. I mean, yeah. Without George Martin, this would not be the same. But two basic themes, but expanded on it. But it's a fascinating novelty, a curio. Paul wrote it when he was at the peak of his creative genius. Between Eleanor Rigby and Penny Lane, really, and all the wonderful stuff that was to come. So I think this album really holds up as the first Beatles solo record. The movie is so wonderful. I watched it again last night for the first time in ages. I've seen it many times in the past. It's all in colour too, which is unusual for one of these British movies in the 1960s. Even towards the middle 60s, some of them were still going in black and white. So this was colour. It looks really good. It looks really good. It doesn't. It look. I watched it last night. It stands up well. It doesn't look as dated as watching a movie from the 1980s does, which is strange, isn't it? Isn't it strange how the cultural check? This has been well talked about, but the cultural. It always gets me still. The cultural changes that took place in the 1960s, the music from the 1960, right from 1960 to 1969. That's just 9 years. I mean, that's what 2016. I can't remember. Apart from a few tech things, much has changed. Well, we could argue getting into politics. No, but culturally, what's not much has changed, has it, in 9 years now? But in the 1960s, all that decade, think of the music from the start of it to the end of it, the cultural changes that took place, even from 1961 to 1963, when the Beatles started, even from 1963 to 1966, the change in direction of the music, and the Beatles led the way. I'm sorry, but they did. So that's why we all love them so much, don't we? And there's lots of other wonderful music that came out, like the Who and the Kinks and Hendrix and loads of people, but yeah, the movies as well. If you think about this one compared to Wonderwall, 1966, it came out. The soundtrack album came out, by the way, early '67, but Wonderwall came out a year later, '68. And I think of the contrast between those two movies. I like those trippy movies of the late 1960s. Did you ever see Candy? Which is Terry Southern, who wrote also Magic Christian, which was adapted to that movie with Peter Sellers and Ringo. Mad book. Terry Southern was a great writer. And he wrote Candy, which is a bizarre. Have you ever seen it? Richard Burton and Marlon Brando. And Ringo is this sort of Mexican gardener. It's a great. I love all that era movies from the early '60s to the late '60s. Love them. But yeah, quite contrasting. But this has got a charm, an innocence still, which really, even though I love Wonderwall, hasn't got. It's got its own charms, Wonderwall, but this is a really, you can tell it's stage play origins. I think the stage play was called All in Good Time, and it's very funny in places, John Mills as his dad. It's because Arthur, the character played by Hugh Bennett in this, he likes classical music, likes chamber music, and Beethoven is often playing it. And when Ezra, his dad, played by John Mills, gets here, he says, what did he say? He says, it's that chamber music that's behind this. There's some great lines in it. There really are. His mum, it was great. Marjorie Rhodes is his mum. She says, there's a line in it when she says when she was younger, she accidentally went into a gents' toilet, and all the guys lined up in raincoats with a headscarf. She said, just like as if they're waiting for a firing squad. And he goes on his honeymoon. That's right. They're on the honeymoon. His best mate Billy comes along with him, and go to Blackpool, and he brings along his mate on his honeymoon. His wife saying, "What kind of man does that?" She's trying to defend Arthur because there's questioning. His father's questioning him. Is he a man because he can't come up with the goods? So his mum was kind of defending him by saying, "Well, what kind of a man brings his best mate on his honeymoon, Billy?" John Mills as Ezra says, "I wasn't going to leave him alone. I wasn't going to leave on his own holiday just because we were wed." It's got some great moments. It really has, and yeah, but a lovely use of the soundtrack. I think that it enhances the movie. It really does. Yeah, I know. And that second piece of music, apparently, George virtually had to stand over Paul again at the piano. It's probably St John's Wood, Cavendish Avenue, sort of like a headmaster. Come on, finish this up. He did it. That's you can tell Paul. You can forgive him. Maybe he showed an interest, but he had lots of come on, he had lots on his plate at that time. It wasn't like being lazy. And his mate George put this together. I think Love in the Open Air won the Ivanella. Yeah, that's right. Won a Ivor Novello Award in 1968 as the best instrumental. So they got kudos. This was the top one of the top selling movies of 1967. Because it came out tail end of '66. Really, I think it came out literally just before Christmas was the premiere. It might have even just got a release in it early '67. Actually, as I say, Paul was still writing that thing just literally a week or so before the movie came out. That was in, so the editors did a good job to put this in there. But it really makes the movie. You're listening for it. Maybe I'm listening for it because when I saw it originally, I was intrigued by the name Paul McCartney on the soundtrack at the end. I think I saw this before I even read that he'd done it. You know, I remember reading the Beatles illustrated record. Roy Carr, that one. Who's the other guy? Tyler Carr, the big LP sized book that you had, pulled out. That was great. They were a bit cynical, weren't they? But I quite like them. They slagged off Ringo's, Sentimental Journey. I think it was a bit of a. I like Sentimental Journey. I'm going to talk about that sometime too. It's really got a special place in my heart for Ringo's Sentimental Journey, which was his first solo album, wasn't it? But I don't think in the Beatles Illustrated record they mentioned this. So I think when I saw it, I had seen it initially. I think, yeah, I'd seen it early when I was younger. So yeah, as I say before, I knew really what was going on. But I saw it again when I was about 14. I did, even though I was a bit of a backward 14-year-old by today's standards. I think I did understand. Do you remember that line in school where people used to come up to you and say, "Are you a virgin?" Do you remember that? You were too young to understand really what a virgin was. Most of it, it went round the school. I don't know. Was it 12? Was it 12, 13? But I think it was. So they say, "Are you a virgin?" And you say, "No," and they say, "Ah." Always say yes, and they go, "Oh." So you didn't really know what to say, did you? Do you remember that? If you're my age, 61 in a few weeks' time. I know. I don't look it. But yeah, there's another lovely scene in the movie where the arm wrestling scene. I love that. Where it's at the wedding, they're all back at the house, and Ezra, John Mills, is doing the elbow game. They call it the elbow game. It's father and son doing it, and initially his son, Hugh Bennett, Arthur's winning. He sees the stress on his dad's face. He's sweaty, and he's going to break him to lose it. So he's winning, and then he lets him win. Great moment. Really astonishingly good movie. This, it really is. If you haven't seen it, do see it. It's really good. I mean, yeah, it's attitudes. I mean, nowadays it's fairly tame, isn't it? This, but its attitudes towards sex and things, are dated. But it's not really dated. It doesn't look dated. It looks really fresh, beautiful. The version I saw last night is beautiful. It looks really crisp. The colours, everything like that. You see old movies sometimes they fade and everything. This one maybe it's been restored, but it's really lovely. But yeah, this is the first Beatles solo recording. It is. It's got Paul's name on it. It's like saying one of those classical, one of those classical music albums that's got Beethoven or Mozart or whatever, Tchaikovsky on the front. Isn't them, but it's because somebody else is playing on it. It's got the conductor's name. It's Paul's. He came up with the themes. Yeah, George. Definitely. Without George, this album wouldn't have happened. But I don't care. It's the first Beatles solo album. Check it out. Listen to it. It's I've got fond memories of it, I have to say. Seeing it when I was younger. My dad buying me a copy of the album, because he loved classical music, my dad. I've inherited all my dad's classical music records. I'll play them one day. Uh, the family way, a small but significant part of the genius of that musical god, Paul McCartney, bless him. Bless you for listening to me. I'll see you again. I sincerely hope so.